could you tell me something about yourself? Could you introduce yourself and say something about your work experience or your educational background, and tell something about your professional life as a trimmer?
Okay. Excuse the tea here, just a bit of a man flu here. Well, basically, I've been doing hoof care for over 20 years. I started out with shoeing, and I got trained by UK farriers and went over to America several times and did all the shoeing stuff. And then I did about 2.5 years of shoeing, and it was just not doing it for me. I kept seeing things going wrong, although I made things a lot better with what I was doing, but it was still, the hooves were just still struggling. And then a few horses basically wanted to put the feet in through sheep netting and pulled the shoes off several times, once hitting on doors, kicking on doors, trying to loosen the nails off. And then there was another little thing that happened was whenever you're clenching up and you put the foot down, and the odd horse would go a little bit ouchy for a day and then be fine again. So all these little signals were telling me that this, although it was better than I'd seen previously with farrieing, but it was just saying this isn't quite right. Anyway, I went and heard about Jamie Jackson, and I went over to see him in California. And when I went to see him, it was quite a different take on things. And so I was there for about a week or so, and I finished with that, and I said, right, I'm going to come along and do a lot more training. But in the meantime, I went back home, and I immediately took all the shoes off my horses, and found by mistakes really that it isn't as simple as just taking them off, but it was a bit of a long process. So anyway, starting seeing hooves actually develop and move into a different shape, how the horse actually really wanted them. Now with the shoeing I did was a different type of shoeing. There's a 4-point like natural balance shoe and side tech shoe, and it held the foot into a bit better, shorter shape. You would say a more natural shape, but when you actually start looking at it, it wasn't natural at all. So when the shoes came off, you started seeing the hoof actually showing you where it wanted to be. And so then I stopped my whole shoeing business, which cost me thousands. I just said, that's it, I'm not going to do it anymore, and packed it in and said, right, I've got to do this. And it was quite a struggle at first, because at that point, this is going back in early 2000, there wasn't enough known about diet. There was mutterings of keep it simple, and that's about it. And then as the years progressed, we started seeing a lot more people researching about diet and the effect of it with the whole hoof and the body and everything else. And then you start putting things together. So over 20 odd years, you see these changes happening. And the one bit that, when you see it, you start seeing how the horse wants to wear its feet, how they want to balance themselves. And that's what is the basis of trimming. You have to understand what the horse is trying to do, and healing processes. You see them very quickly emerge. So I've been doing this for, like, as I say, over 20 years now. I've traveled in lots of different countries: Africa, with Tanzania, Kenya, South Africa, Namibia, and then Israel, all around Europe, across to America. Helped with NHCP training with James Jackson, and then they split up, and I went with Liberated Horsemanship, and I still help them. But there's an awful lot of really good people out there that have been around for a long time. And there's an awful lot of people say a lot of different things, seemingly, but in actual fact, they're not far from saying the same things when you actually come down to it.
Yeah.
For me, the most important thing is understanding what that particular horse is trying to do and where he wants to go to, and allowing it that little bit of leeway rather than forcing a particular shape on it.
Can you, so you already mentioned a little bit about the importance of hoof wear patterns, but could you explain a little bit more why it's so important for you, and why the hoof can tell so much about the body above it?
Yeah, well, with the hoof wear patterns, a lot of people hear the saying hoof wear patterns, and there's the hoof wear patterns that you see in nature, which means that you have a rolled hoof, and you can roll either, it breaks over every which direction it wants to go. So it forms a very smooth, round, solid shape, just like you would with giraffe, deer, antelope, anything. Okay. Now, we're not talking about them particular wear patterns which show you how a hoof ideally should be. We're talking about the individual. Now, each individual, as in with humans, if you look at your feet and look at your shoes and boots, you'll have a wear pattern that you wear consistently in a certain way. Now, for humans, if you're wearing shoes, which is a bad thing anyway, you're better off with something minimalistic. But if you were to wear shoes, what you should do as soon as you start wearing that pattern in, you should throw the shoes away or drill them down, but you should go back again, because if you over wear it, it means you start tipping your joints, tipping your hip, tipping your shoulders, and you start walking in a certain way. Now, of course, Barbara here is going to tell you all about that later. But when you look underneath the hoof, you'll see certain parts of the foot are very worn, very smooth, and they give you an indication of where that horse really wants to move. And then you'll see other parts that are built up. They may be flared, for whether it's a true flare or a false flare, or they might be slightly higher in one bit. That means it hasn't been worn down or hasn't been used particularly well. Now, that can be because of the way a joint is set, but it gives you an indication of where that horse wants to be. Now, if you can equal them up and make them more balanced, that horse will get to move a lot easier.
The hoof wear patterns actually tells you where the horse wants to move or wants to go, or what direction of the hoof it wants to use. But does it tell us this a bit about preference, or maybe injury, or natural asymmetry of the body, or rather a preferred posture of movement of the horse, or is it always injury or the not well-being of the horse body related, such a thing as a hoof wear pattern?
Okay, what I would say is that hoof is highly compensatory. So whatever happens to the body will show up in the hooves. So if, for instance, you have a rider that sits in a certain way, that'll force the horse to wear its hoof in a certain way. So if something changes, so the environment changes, and if you have, as an example, if you have a track system, and the track system is just straight along, turn, so you're on a square, what you'll end up with is horses that will have a set pattern, because they're not doing any more than going round in a square. So they will form a pattern to that. They may go to the right and then turn around, go to the left, but they're essentially going straight and round a corner. So they're not actually using their bodies fully. And I had that happen. There was one particular place, and they had two horses, and through all the quarters, they were higher. They were very balanced on the heels, very balanced in the toe area. But in the quarters, they were all high. What I said to the woman is, I'm going to come back in 6 weeks' time, but in that 6 weeks, I want you to lunge these horses, put them on a circle and chase them around, get them cantering around, bucking, farting, leaping around, having a bit of fun. And so she did that for 6 weeks. I came back, and the feet, no trimming was involved. All the feet were beautifully level and beveled all the way around. The quarters had worn because she made the horse move, or both horses move the same way. So that was a very quick reaction and response. Now, if you cut a joint, a crooked joint, then you're going to have a preference of how the horse lands that foot. It doesn't necessarily say that if it has that preference, you can't help balance it, because it can't actually wear it itself because of the way it lands and loads. So if we encourage it to actually land and load more equally, you'll have a more comfortable horse. And then you also won't have as much pressure coming down through one joint or the other, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, so it's like more like the hoof wear patterns can both seen as a consequence of a body problem or leg problem or an anatomical problem, but also as a habit of movement problem. At the beginning, you also mentioned that if it's not, I don't know if I use the word corrected in a trim well, but if you see a hoof wear pattern, you adjust actually the other not wore down part, so that the hoof wear problem of the hoof wear pattern doesn't become a problem. Is that does that make sense?
Yeah, and that's exactly right. I mean, if you leave it, all it means is it goes further and further out of balance. And there's an awful lot of people now saying, you come down and do your trimming every 1 week or 2 weeks or 4 weeks, depending on the growth rate. So that doesn't establish itself as being a problem. And that's great. So it's not very practical if you're a trimmer and having to go back every week because you can't fit it in. So what you do is you get your owners involved, show them and let them understand. And the thing is, if they understand this, it doesn't mean you're out of work. It just means that when you go along and check up and do, you've got less to do. The horse stays in balance more, and everybody's happy, including the horse. So I think it goes back to, if we look at horses in the wild in feral circumstances, they can have funky feet, just like any animal. But the thing is a good example is in Namibia, the horses out there, you see some with fantastic looking hooves, perfectly round and wonderful, and then you see some with huge big false flares to support because their joints are wonky. But the hooves are still worn perfectly everywhere. So you don't have any high bits, everything's smoothed. So although they're compensated for the actual joints and how they land and load, they still keep everything smooth. So it's quite possible for them to do it in nature. So there's no reason why we shouldn't try and aim for that in domestication. So when we try and look at trying to correct things, that's when we fall down, because you have to recognize what a correction is by the horse and why it's doing it and where it's trying to get to. And if you see how the patterns are, you can make a map of these patterns, a schematic, and then you can see that progress, and you can then have a conversation with the rider or the trainer and say, okay, we're doing this, now the horse is doing this still, you need to do a little bit more of this or that because this isn't working, if that makes sense. Example of, if you look at a horse's hind legs and you see the hoof flaring to the inside, just look up to the top of the horse, top of the hind limbs, there's a problem there. It's the same with the front, then it's in the chest somewhere, there's a tightness there. You shouldn't get this flaring on the inside. It's not natural or normal. But just seeing that, you can say, okay, I know there's a problem. So what you need to do is work with body workers, chiros, acupuncturists, whatever else it is, to try and correct it as much as you can do. Now, obviously, if something is setting its joints, you're only going to do small incremental changes. But it's quite surprising how much change over a relatively short period of time you can make.
Are the hoof wear patterns that the horse exhibits the only guideline you use when you're making choices during the trimming, or do you look for something else?
Well, the first thing we check is the medial lateral balance, for which I use Daniel Lance's F balance method for. I find it's pretty well spot on most of the time, and also just not that only as a guide, but also the hard sole plane, how the whole hoof shape is, and the thickness of the sole and the material. So there's a lot of feeling and touching of the hoof before we decide anything with trimming. So I went out and started teaching, and our first person I taught was an old client who trims her own, competes her own horses barefoot, does the whole 9 yards. And I mentioned to her about wear patterns, and I said, I must have told you about this. She says, no, you've never said this. I've always heard people say wear patterns, but nobody's never explained it. And I thought, I haven't explained it because I thought it was something everybody knew about. And for me, it's so basic. It's what I've always used. So I pick a foot, I look at it, I know that's what I want. I don't actually watch the horse move because the wear patterns tell you exactly how the horse is moving. So if you pick the foot up, you can see how it's wearing in one way. And on that foot, you look at the rest of the feet and you know how that's wearing as well. You put all 4 feet together on a schematic, and then you see exactly what the horse is doing. All you have to do to check that out is you can walk the horse up and down, you can trot the horse up and down. But the thing is, you have to remember is them wear patterns that you're seeing are not made in walk and trot alone. They're made in canter, gallop, kicking, bucking, farting, having sex, whatever else they're going to do. All these little movements, movement of the whisker, a blowing of the nose, everything that adds to that movement, adds to that wear pattern. So to look in isolation at a walk and trot, it doesn't give you enough information about how the horse moves. So what I tend to do is I tend to get the horse to walk up and down, so you can just see how it's awkward or not, if it's lame or not. And then what I tend to do is turn the horse very tightly to the left and very tightly to the right. That to me shows all the weaknesses and strengths very, very quickly, because a horse should be able to move and cross its legs over each way without hesitation and do it smoothly. And do you know how much of a percentage of horses that can do that?
Well, in my own experience, not that much.
Exactly.
Not that much.
No. So, but after you've trimmed them, looking at the wear patterns, you'll see them moving one hell of a lot better, a lot easier. I enjoy doing clinics anyway, and every single clinic is different because every single person everyone's at different levels. You can have 10 professionals and all be at different places in their careers. They can all be very good and they all have strengths in one direction, and they'll have things they haven't looked at or thought of, or they've set to the side because it isn't as important to them, maybe. So getting people to pay attention to every single horse they do and do everything. People get lax and they forget things. It isn't because they don't know them, sometimes they just forget them. And then you get reminded when they go to these sort of clinics, and it's like a CPD, as we say in the UK, the continuing professional development type of course, where they go along and go, why haven't I done that? Yeah. I should have done that. And then it sort of ticks the box and go, I know there's a reason why I did that or not did that. So I like the way that people start thinking and they ask you questions. I like people asking questions. Sometimes if I don't know the answer, I'll just say, well, I don't know. I'm not the Encyclopedia Britannica or anything. So
Hoofopedia.
Yeah, exactly. Hoofopedia. Yeah. But I know what I've experienced and what I've seen, and usually I don't get surprised by anything much. And because, as I said, I've been in a lot of different countries, lots of situations. And the funny thing is they all have the same problems and issues. It doesn't matter where you are; it's the same sort of things. So trying to get people to be consistent and trying to get everyone to be compliant when you're doing the horses is always difficult. So for trimmers, having the compliance and the enthusiasm of that trimmer taken on board by the owner or trainer or vet or whoever else is involved in that horse is sometimes very difficult. And if people get to a stage where they go, well, you know, I've said it 3,000 times, and then they stop saying it, and then they forget about it, then they go along to a clinic, and then they go, I have to repeat that, because people are lax, you know.
Yeah, but it's not always lax. It's sometimes you hear information where you're not ready yet for it, because it's certain pathologies or certain issues with hooves, you don't see that every day, or you are not ready to notice it every day. And sometimes you have like a part of information that is thrown at you and it just bounces back because there's nothing there already to cling on. And I think this is for every trimmer, it's an evolution, and everybody searches his own path. And yeah, for one person it's a highway, other persons are more sightseeing, and so I think this is for everybody different. But I think that the Hoof Wear Patterns is the method behind it, and the idea, and the also the very easy visual markings and stuff. I think everybody can use it and implement it very easy in their trimming. On what way, on what level they are, on what vision they are. It's very easy to incorporate this.
Well, I've taught this now to vets, farriers, trimmers, horse owners, and everybody sees it and see the benefit of it. And particularly farriers and body workers and the vets, they were like, "Oh my God, this is like nobody's taught us this before," and it makes sense for them because it's a diagnostic tool for them, if you like. And there's one thing with the course that we're going to be doing that you've arranged is that we've done it on 3 days, and people got 2 horses each. Now they're going to go, well, I can trim a horse, 2 horses, I'll do that. And what do I do the rest of the day? Well, I'm afraid you're going to be going looking at things and then re-looking at things. And so you get to a really good visual of it, and then you'll see other people what they're doing on the hoof wear patterns of the horses they have as well. So what you'll do is get a rough schematic of all 4 feet, mark down certain things, and watch the horses, visualize them all, and then the next day we actually trim them and watch them, and then the 3rd day you'll be going back to them, looking at them wear patterns, and did I miss something? Have we found something else that's different? Can we refine this more or not? And so we're going to be able to take our time, because in practice, when you're working, you don't have that time. And then the other thing is that we're going to see them every 6 weeks. That's the same lot of horses, and you'll see how them horses develop or not. Okay. So what an opportunity. I wish I'd had that when I started. And I think whenever people train, it's really hard to get that time out to see this progression. It's something you can't learn in a book. You can't read online. You have to go and see and do. And if you're there and somebody's pointing it out to you, sometimes you can see stuff and you don't know you've seen it. But if someone's pointing out to you, it becomes very obvious.
The benefits of basing the trim on the hoof wear patterns.
Okay. If you understand the hoof wear patterns, first of all, and you start seeing that the horse, you can get a horse moving more comfortably and more easily, then each time you come to that horse and do it, the horse is almost lifting its leg up for you and saying, oh yes, please, can I have that? But also the thing is, if sharing it with your owners, is that then you can get the owners involved and try and keep this so as things don't go out of balance too much. The horse is going to be more grateful to them as well. So as riders, they're going to feel the benefit of it. If you see how that horse moves after you've trimmed, you can do a trim and say, okay, that's balanced up and down. But if you then refine it and just take out small bits, you'll start seeing how much of a difference that makes. One example is if you get a medial lateral balance and it's out by a millimetre. You wouldn't think that makes a lot of difference, but it does. And when you do the test of turning the horse to the left and to the right, you'll see the slight stuttering of movement. You take that 1 mil off and the horse moves so much easier. So getting that accuracy is really, really important to the horse. And I've seen a lot of people go, it's okay, it's good enough. It's not, because that small difference makes a huge difference to the whole body. And when you see it and you feel it, and what we also will do is actually put our hands over the horse, feel the muscles before and then after you've trimmed it. Yep. So you'll see, there was one horse we did at one clinic, and he'd been in Spain and he'd been all over the place. And the person there was a vet physio. And so she knew the horse, had treated it a couple of times. So she felt over the muscles, watch everyone else feel over the muscles, and they also had the tight bits and everything else. Then afterwards, everything went soft. And we trimmed very little off that horse's feet. There was about 2-3 adjustments on each hoof, and that was it. That horse's muscle structure softened. And when you get that softness and you get a horse relaxing, licking and chewing, and just dropping its head and going, yeah, that's nice. That's so rewarding. So to me, it's like, that's what you want out of a trim, is that relaxedness, it's sort of feedback from the horse. We got together and chatted about this, and because a lot of people hadn't really thought about hoof wear patterns and the meanings of them, but it made them look at the whole body of the horse. And then we were thinking, well, can we make a course that will be hugely beneficial to these professionals, so they can take it away and understand it properly and have time on their own with us guiding them through it. So it becomes almost like a 2-second thing. When they pick the foot up, they don't have to think about it, it's going to be there. But then if we do it so they can have a schematic, and then they can show their clients and show everyone else very quickly, then this will work for them in their day-to-day business. An example was one farrier who I showed, and he got it straight away and said, this is brilliant. I can actually I've got a blackboard on the back of my van, and I can go and draw on the back of my van as I'm doing the horse. So then I can show the owner how the horse is moving and what they need to do to change that. So then when I come back, I can do the ball again. I'll take a photo shot of it, and there it is. And it can show the owner if the owner's done enough, or does need to do more, or is that it? Is that how the horse actually is going to go? Is that the best we can do? So you have a way of actually taking a timeline and then seeing an improvement or a stability, let's say. So you've got something very, very strong that you can actually show, and you can show that to vets, farriers, chiropractors, anybody else involved, the horse dentist, trainer. You know, once they see this and understand that schematic, it's not the thing to say is that it doesn't matter where you trained at, what school of training you were, whether it's a equine podiatrist or national hoof care or farrier or wherever it is, it doesn't actually matter.
Yeah.
You know, you've got tools, you know how to use tools. That's all it requires. What we're going to do is show you a different way of looking at it, and it's something else you can actually practically use very quickly.
Mm-hmm. The training will be organized as a 3-day intensive clinic to get the group started, and then every other interval we come back together and trim again the horses for up to 5 times. So it's the complete hoof renewal cyclist that we are able to guide into the right direction, hopefully. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, as we do the first bit and we get it so as you can really get it into your system, into a way of thinking about it. So that first few days is going to be doing things slowly, steadily, giving yourself time to really understand and watch and take your time over it.
And really understand everything, and see everything and feel it.
Yeah. So then once you've got that, you can also take that to your clients' horses and start with them and go with that quite quickly, quite easily. But then when you come back each time, you'll be doing the same horses, and you'll see what's changed with them, because you'll be taking photographs of the hooves. You can even take a video of the horses moving on a circle, and you'll see the difference in it. You'll see if the hoof wear patterns have gone back to the same, changed anything. And sometimes it's quite surprising how much change you see, and sometimes you don't see any change at all. Sometimes you'll see something that blocks in a different way. That horse might be injured, it may have had a kick in the field, it may have slipped. The horse will then compensate.
Yeah.
And then you'll be asking questions. So when we come back, this is when people will be able to ask you, Barbara, and say, well, what's happened? And you'll be saying to the owner who runs the place, is there anything new happened that we should know about? So we might be looking for something different. So horses are a wonderful species. They do all sorts of stupid shit, a bit like humans, really. But so whenever they do these, they show us in the way that they grow or compensate on the hooves. So if you get animal that's injured, you'll see a pattern emerge. Okay, and when you get a pattern on one hoof, the other thing to bear in mind, you'll see that the whole hoof, you'll get one hoof that wears more than any of the other hooves. Every horse has got one really good hoof, and you'll see that strong wear pattern on that one hoof. It's like a supporting hoof. And then the others, you'll get varying degrees of usability. So not only are we looking at the wear patterns, but exactly how much the horse is wearing on the other feet. And so if you'll get a pattern built up the first 3 days. So when you come back the next time, and you'll see the pattern may have changed, or it may have done something completely different. But you usually see a steady progress in a direction. But you'll soon know if there's something different that's happened.
And the horses that we with the group will work on, they are very well behaved and very nice and decent horses, because they are older riding school horses. These horses tend to have a lot of pathology going on because of their age and because of their heavy duty and heavy work life. You think that we can also improve their movement enough to make their life a little bit easier?
Yeah, I think so. There's a stage where every horse gets to where their joints are formed and solid in a certain way, and you may not be able to change that, but you may change that the other ones that are supporting it can support it a bit easier. So if there's one particular leg with one injury, and it's like if you injure yourself, you crick your neck, you will hold your shoulders and hips in a certain way.
Yeah.
If that's uncricked, then everything else comes a little bit smoother. Now you might be just set like that a little bit, but you can feel better through it. So yeah, we can generally improve things.
Yeah.
But that's for people to find out themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that is we will see there every pathology that exists, I can imagine. But also it's nice that you actually said a few times that it's also relatable to our own bodies as a trimmer. We are, well, all farriers and trimmers, we are really tough cookies. We don't acknowledge pain, and whilst doing that, we are building up every injury after injury. So this is where I can maybe make a little bit of a difference for the trimmers too. So in this training here, we will be also practicing a little bit of the Franklin method, and I will guide everybody into hopefully a better way of movement during trimming. So this will be done by body awareness exercises. The Franklin method is a scientifically proven method, and it will definitely use sort of anatomical knowledge and certain exercises and insights that you get into your own body, so that you can move better and move better while trimming. And this is the thing that we will practice every training, every meeting. We will do a certain part of the body, so that at the end that you have a better body plan in your mind and a better body movements while trimming. So this is where I come in.
So basically, this is an opportunity that you're not going to get very often. And I've been and seen lots of different training in a lot of different places, and the one overriding thing is that there's not enough time taken underneath them horses and looking at the fine detail. Yeah. And that's what's really needed. And that's what we want to do, is fill that gap in. So it gives you a really strong basis to go back to. So when you're talking to other professionals, you can look straight away and you can point these out. It's not just guessing, it's what the horse is telling you. And to be able to take that time and be able to understand these things is so important. And it'll make your whole work a lot happier doing this. And be able to, with Barbara's help, actually get your body moving easier and better. So, we're going to have one or two of the horses that are older and move slightly oddly. I'm going to show you ways that you may not have thought of when you're actually trimming them or coming to handle them.
Yeah. And I think it's also a very excellent opportunity to see a complete herd, because this is a herd of 22 horses that have the same movement, they have the same housing, they have the same, well, not all have the same food, because some of them have a certain pathology and need some extra nutrition, but there is not that much variation. They are not being ridden, so the biggest variation that will be our hoof trimming, our input for them. So I think it would be extraordinary opportunity to look at a complete herd and see the changes and count the changes one after the other horse, hopefully, and change the complete herd for the better. Would you like to welcome at this training?
Well, really, any professional that is involved with hoof care. Like I say, I've taught farriers, vets, horse owners, the professional trimmers, but really I want to get at the people who are professionals, and maybe ones who are starting out as well, who want more input just now as they're starting out on their own and starting to build their client base. Because this hoof wear patterns, it builds your confidence very quickly, because you see it straight away and you know exactly what it is. You don't need to look in a book, you don't need anything else. It's there in front of you, it's on the horse.
Yeah.
So really, just anybody that wants to improve their lot really and improve their horses more.
Yeah. Also, horse owners that trim their horses themselves. If you have a horse owner, sometimes they have like 10 or 20 horses themselves, so they trim. Yeah. They are nearly on a self-professional basis. Horse owners, professional trimmers on every level, doesn't matter what level, farriers,
vets, even if they're
vets and
interested.
body workers can come along too.
I think the emphasis has got to be more towards the professional, semi-professional, because if we've got professionals there, they don't want to be sitting. You've got to be able to handle tools.
Yeah,
you have to have the basics to be able to trim.
Yeah, you have to be able to handle the tools. That's